Alright, let's dive right into the fascinating world of Casu Marzu. This peculiar cheese has a long cultural history and is deeply rooted in the traditions of Sardinia, an island located in the Mediterranean Sea, which is part of Italy. Casu Marzu, which literally translates to rotten cheese, is a type of pecorino cheese that has been intentionally infested with live maggots to achieve its distinct flavor and texture. So how's Casu Marzu made? Well, the process starts with a wheel of pecorino cheese that is left outside to allow the cheese fly, Piophila casei, to lay its eggs inside. Once the eggs hatch into larvae, the real magic begins. These tiny maggots consume the cheese, breaking down its fats and fermenting it from the inside out. This results in a creamy, soft, and spreadable cheese that is said to have a very strong, pungent flavor. Some even describe it as spicy. Now you might be wondering why anyone would want to eat cheese filled with live maggots. The truth is, Casu Marzu has been a part of Sardinian culture for centuries. It's a delicacy that has been passed down through generations and is often reserved for special occasions or celebrations. The presence of the maggots is actually considered a sign of quality, as it indicates that the fermentation process is in full swing. In Sardinia, Casu Marzu is typically enjoyed with a glass of strong red wine, and it is often spread on flatbread called pain carousel. Some brave souls even eat the cheese, with the live maggots still wriggling inside, while others prefer to remove the larvae before indulging. So there you have it. A brief introduction to the cultural history and traditional methods behind the production of Casu Marzu. Up next, we'll be discussing the role of the cheese fly in the fermentation process. So stay tuned. Now that we've learned about the cultural history and traditional methods behind Casu Marzu, let's delve into the crucial role played by the cheese fly, Piophila casei, in the fermentation process of this unique cheese. Piophila casei, commonly known as the cheese fly, is a small insect that's attracted to the smell of fermenting cheese. When a wheel of pecorino cheese is left exposed, these flies lay their eggs on the surface, which then hatch into larvae, or maggots. It's these little wriggling creatures that are responsible for transforming the cheese into Casu Marzu. So, how exactly do these maggots break down the cheese to create its characteristic creamy consistency? Well, as the larvae feed on the cheese, they release enzymes that help break down the fats and proteins in the cheese. This process, combined with the physical action of the maggots tunneling through the cheese, leads to a fermentation process that softens the cheese and creates its distinctively creamy texture. One interesting fact about these maggots is that they can actually jump up to 6 inches when disturbed. So when consuming Casu Marzu, it's common practice to hold a hand over the cheese to prevent the maggots from leaping out. In the next section, we'll examine the health risks associated with consuming Casu Marzu, including potential bacterial contamination and the dangers of ingesting live maggots, which can cause intestinal myiasis. Stay tuned. Now that we've covered the cultural history and the fermentation process of Casu Marzu, it's time to examine the health risks associated with consuming this maggot-infested cheese. Casu Marzu, while it may be a beloved delicacy in Sardinia, there are some serious concerns regarding its safety. One of the primary health risks associated with Casu Marzu is the potential for bacterial contamination. The cheese is exposed to the open air during the fermentation process, which makes it vulnerable to contamination by harmful bacteria, such as Salmonella or E. coli. These bacteria can cause severe food poisoning, characterized by symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Another health risk linked to Casu Marzu is the ingestion of live maggots. When consuming the cheese, it's possible to inadvertently ingest some of the wriggling larvae. These maggots can survive the acidic environment of the stomach and make their way into the intestines, where they can cause a condition known as intestinal myiasis. This is a rare but serious condition in which the maggots burrow into the intestinal walls, causing pain, inflammation, and even tissue damage. While some people may be willing to take these risks in order to experience the unique flavor and texture of Casu Marzu, it's important to be aware of the potential dangers involved. In the next section, we'll explore the legal status of Casu Marzu in the European Union and the efforts made by Sardinian cheesemakers to preserve their traditional practice while adhering to food safety regulations. Stay tuned. Now that we've discussed the health risks associated with Casu Marzu, let's take a look at its legal status in the European Union and the efforts made by Sardinian cheesemakers to preserve their traditional practice while adhering to food safety regulations. Due to the potential health risks we just discussed, Casu Marzu has been outlawed by the European Union. EU food hygiene and safety regulations are quite strict, and the production methods of Casu Marzu do not meet the required standards. Consequently, selling and distributing this maggot-infested cheese is illegal within the EU, and those who are caught may face hefty fines or even jail time. Despite this prohibition, Sardinian cheesemakers are determined to keep their tradition alive. They've been working on alternative production methods that could meet food safety regulations while still maintaining the unique characteristics of Casu Marzu. For example, some cheesemakers are experimenting with using lab-grown maggots that have been carefully monitored and controlled to minimize the risk of bacterial contamination. Another approach to preserve the tradition is to apply for the traditional food exception, which is a special designation within EU food safety regulations that allows for the production and sale of certain foods that have a long cultural history, even if they don't meet all the standard safety requirements. However, obtaining the status for Casu Marzu has proven to be challenging, and the battle to legalize it continues. In the next and final section, we'll investigate the global fascination and demand for Casu Marzu, as well as the underground market and smuggling operations that have emerged in response to its prohibition in the European Union. Stay tuned. As we wrap up our exploration of Casu Marzu, let's dive into the global fascination and demand for this unique cheese, as well as the underground market and smuggling operations that have emerged in response to its prohibition in the European Union. Despite being outlawed in the EU, Casu Marzu has gained a sort of cult following among food enthusiasts, adventurers, and those willing to try exotic and daring culinary experiences. The cheese's reputation for its intensely pungent flavor and creamy texture, combined with the daring act of consuming live maggots, has piqued the curiosity of people around the world. This global fascination has led to a thriving underground market for Casu Marzu. The cheese is often produced and sold secretly in Sardinia, and it has even been smuggled across borders to satisfy the demand in other countries. Some reports indicate that Casu Marzu can fetch a hefty price on the black market, with a single pound of the cheese selling for up to €100 or more. Smuggling operations can be quite elaborate, with the cheese being concealed in various ways to avoid detection by authorities. Some smugglers have been caught trying to transport Casu Marzu in luggage, or even hiding it in the trunk of their car. This underground market not only highlights the determination of Sardinian cheesemakers and enthusiasts to keep the tradition alive, but also raises concerns about the safety and quality of Casu Marzu being sold illicitly. Without proper oversight and regulatory control, there is an increased risk of consuming contaminated or unsafe cheese. In conclusion, Casu Marzu is a fascinating and controversial delicacy with a rich cultural history, unique production process, and potential health risks. Its prohibition in the European Union has led to a thriving underground market, as well as ongoing efforts by Sardinian cheesemakers to preserve their traditional practices while adhering to food safety regulations. Whether or not Casu Marzu will ever gain legal status in the EU remains to be seen, but one thing is certain. This maggot-infested cheese continues to capture the imagination and curiosity of people around the globe.